Welcome into another edition of New Track Record Podcast. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney with you from the WELT studios in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And before we get rolling on everything, last week's episode shortened. That was not by design. That was an error. The file was shorter than anticipated because there was, no file when I went to upload everything. And
Some of our best work ever lost.
So, mailbag gone. Sorry about that. We'll redo our random split error driver of the week. We'll redo tweets of the week. And we will do rate the race as well to make up. So we'll have it all this week, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
But yeah, not sure what happened, but the file said 0. And thankfully there was a cut down version saved on the computer that we were able to pull from. All that said, hi, Justin.
Hello, Caleb.
How are we? I'm good. How are you?
Doing well. It's been a really nice week around here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what they call false spring.
Well, this is like the second false spring, right?
Fall. I'd say it's the most extended false spring we've had.
Yes.
But next week back in the 40s and 50s, but 60s for most of the week, supposed to hit 70 tomorrow and Saturday, I think. So it's really pleasant around here. You almost think, okay, let's start practicing at the Speedway, but we got to wait a couple months for that.
Yes. Well, really just over a month.
That's true with the test, right? Yeah. So and who knows? We may not have as warm of weather for the test as what we're having right now here in Indiana. So we'll take what we can get at this part of the calendar, and we're counting down the days till IndyCar's at Thermal, which will come up next weekend.
Yeah, and we'll see. In fact, we'll have more on Thermal and a date announcement for Arlington and what that could mean for Thermal next year. All speculation on our part. Also, Takuma Sato confirmed in a fourth entry for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. We'll start off with that. Sato is back. Not really a surprise. We expected the two-time Indy 500 winner to be back with Rahal for 2025. That officially announced. Amada will again serve as the primary sponsor. And what is interesting about this program is that last year, you have to remember, he out-qualified all the other Rahal cars, finished in the Fast 12, was 10th in terms of the race, defeated two other Rahal teammates by coming in 14th. Christian Lundgaard came in 13th, just ahead of him. So I would say that kind of says a lot about Rahal as a team, at least in the last couple of years, but also he is going to be the guy relied upon in terms of finding speed at Indianapolis. And I think this is a great hire by them. Why not get a two-time winner back with your team and hopefully help them out, because it has been dreadful in terms of qualifying and finishing results for the team going back for several years now.
It's an interesting point because as recently as a couple weeks ago, there were stories out there kind of questioning whether Rahal was going to add another one to the field for Indianapolis. The fact that they are, not just with the guy that has won the Indianapolis 500 with Rahal Letterman Lanigan, but also has been the fastest at the team for a while, at least last year, at his return to Rahal Letterman, but kind of makes you think this team is still searching for it in May. And why not bring a guy back that has shown the propensity to be fast, to win, and also seem to be the most comfortable in the seat last year among the team. And so that, to me, maybe is a bite the bullet type situation for Bobby Rahal to say, well, maybe we don't have the entire budget we would need or we need to run Taku, but we need him in the car because he's the one that's able to get everything we possibly can out of this formula, and we need him to be here to help our other entries.
This is pretty wild. You want to guess the last time this team had a top 10 finisher in the Indy 500?
I will say when Taku won it.
Not quite that bad, but close. 2021, Sato was 14th. Graham Rahal was 32nd. But their third car that year, where they ran 3 at Indy. Santino Ferrucci came in 6th in a handful of races. So that was the last top 10 finish for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing in the Indianapolis 500.
And not just not having top 10s, but flirting with and having disaster in terms of qualifying for the race multiple seasons.
Yes. So obviously, I think it's a smart hire. And where you look at it, not only is the grid full, but you officially have bumping as he's the 34th car and driver combo. I think we'll get to 35. I think it'll be Catherine Legg.
I hope so.
It sounds like that will happen. IndyCar is kind of shopping, and IMS are kind of shopping her around to teams. Obviously, it'll be a Honda entry. We know that at this point. And in terms of, where does she land? It sounds like the ELF sponsorship is back. So, I mean, you think the obvious starting point's Dale Coyne Racing. I saw a rumor about Brian Herta Autosport returning and her coming in.
What?
So I don't know, but I would expect her to be the 35th entry. I would be very surprised if we have 36, because it doesn't sound like Ganassi is going to run that extra car.
I'm going to go way off the deep end here because you mentioned Brian Herta. And we mentioned last week our belief that Michael Andretti is not done with IndyCar.
Mm-hmm.
What if they team up again in the next couple of years for a team?
That's fascinating. I like where you're going with it.
I mean, Brian Herta is, maybe the new blood at Andretti IndyCar is what it's called now, apparently. He'd obviously exit that operation as he knows less and less people. I don't know. I could see that, the band getting back together, so to speak. But, if that's a Brian Herta Autosport entry, could that be the first step towards branching off from Andretti and then coming back together with Michael in the next year or two, potentially?
I could see that. It would make a lot of sense. I mean, Herta was an Andretti guy, still is an Andretti guy. That would maybe be the partnership, and maybe they form a team. The problem is charters just completely throw a wrench into any growth outside the Indy 500. And obviously the growth of the Indy 500 is dependent on the engine manufacturers. So
or lack thereof.
Yes, it makes it tough in general. So the exact words from Nathan Brown, the IndyStar.com, talking about Catherine Legg. She remains active in working to secure a ride for this year's field with a Honda-affiliated team, having already secured a full budget to fund a ride. Last year's primary sponsor, ELF Cosmetics, re-upping their support from a year ago, and with private support from decision-makers at Honda Racing Corp USA to find a home for this May, she remains a likely but not guaranteed final addition to the field. So it really just comes down to, is the budget enough? Does the team see enough value, whoever adds her, to take the risk? Because, again, we're talking 2 cars getting bumped here.
Very true. And if you're a team kind of like Dale Coyne, and you're like, and we've heard from team owners before about this, is if I add a car, am I just competing with myself to make the race type thing?
Rahal adds a 4th car.
I mean, that's the thing. So that's the big thing, I think. I think, of course, if the check is big enough, then it doesn't matter. And I think Dale Coyne too, maybe Coyne wants to get through the first couple races, make sure he's not facing any huge bills for rebuilt race cars, stuff like that, before he commits to adding a car, stuff like that. So I think there's still a lot to be decided with that, but we don't feel, obviously with Elio in at Meyer Shank, that's not an option. You have Marco, obviously, in at Andretti, so that's really not an option unless it's a Brian Herta Autosport pseudo entry. That's kind of your only options right now outside of Coyne. So we'll see over the next couple weeks, see how it goes. Catherine Legg, of course, had her debut in the Cup Series last week. Didn't really go as planned, but I don't think we really had too much expectation for Catherine Legg anyway.
Well, Kevin Harvick basically said she was thrown to the wolves, like it was an unfair kind of situation. I thought that was an interesting comment by him.
Well,
was it Kevin Harvick or Kyle Busch?
It was Kevin Harvick.
Kevin Harvick.
Now, thrown into the wolves, what's that mean? Because it sounded like Catherine Legg was all about racing and does he?
Well, and she did the ARCA race at Daytona. It's not like it's a complete fresh start.
Should she have? Did Kevin Harvick think she should have done a couple Xfinity races or something, or was there something in terms of the support side of things that wasn't there? All indications from Catherine Legg's side was this is something she wanted to do and felt that this was the opportunity to do it. So. I think the big thing here is ELF and the activation that they had last year at the Speedway. We talked about it last week was so big and brought in a different element that you don't traditionally see, obviously, with a makeup line and female dominated and all that. So I think it would be very much welcome to have ELF and Catherine Legg back. Hopefully it happens, but the teams have to look after their current entries first and make sure that it makes financial sense. And Dale Coyne will have to see if the numbers add up to be worth adding a car for Indianapolis this May. It made me think, though, when's the last time that Coyne only had
two cars?
That's
a great question. So,
and I'm kind of scanning the results.
Wikipedia machine.
So
they only had one. Was
one
it
last
two?
year?
Well, was it two?
Well, two because Siegel
didn't qualify.
So I guess they only had two. Didn't have to look too far back, but as many as four as recently. They only had two in 2023 and two in 2022. So who knows what we're talking about? It's been several years they've had two.
Yeah, and part of that I think was more situation based. I feel like they have two fully funded cars this year.
True.
So it's maybe less. And I mean, you feel really confident about Rinus VeeKay not just making the field, but, could he be an outside shot, fast 12 contender? I mean, I doubt it, but who knows? I mean, he already had a top 10 in race one. So, I mean, you have to feel really confident about what they did. Jacob Abel, who it was close, right, at least Abel Motorsports was close to having a car in the grid. It wouldn't have been Jacob Abel, but I think you feel better about the situation this year compared to last year.
You do, but at the same time, last year was the first time since 2018 that a Coyne car did not qualify for the Indianapolis 500. Is that in the mind of Dale Coyne saying, I can't risk last year happening again and missing the race with any of my cars?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe he is really bullish on saying, I only got two this year. We have to make sure two cars make the field, as opposed to we got to make sure three cars make the field. And similar to what we said about Rahal, Dale Coyne may be thinking, if I'm competing with myself to make the race, then what's the point of running an extra car?
Well, and you look at the grid, I mean, Meyer Shank's not running a fourth car, right?
Correct.
Chip Ganassi's not running a fourth car. It would have to be Andretti running a fifth or Coyne running a third. Right. And I feel like Coyne is the only realistic option here.
Unless there's that
split
Brian
thing.
Hurd Autosport.
Now, that would have to be where it's a standalone entry, but receiving technical support from Andretti Global, something like that, right?
Yeah, which maybe they're like, hey, we're not with Meyer Shank anymore, so we have the resources, maybe? I don't know. In terms of the
to be fair, when Shank first ran the Indy 500, it was an Andretti affiliated entry with Jack Harvey.
That's true.
So way back in 2017. So that's to say that there's a chance something like this could happen.
And coming back around, talking about Brian Herta, could this be the first step into branching off and bringing Michael Andretti back into the swing of things, even if it's just an Indy only entry for a couple years?
Also fair.
Until a charter opens up, or two charters or something like that.
So looking at the grid, I guess we can speculate super early. Who is at risk of being bumped?
Jacob Abel.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you look
Schwartzman?
I don't know. I mean, it'll be Prema's first oval, which kind of stinks for them. But
or do you default one of the Andretti cars, whether it's Foster, who's a rookie, or DeFrancesco, or Rahal? Because let's be honest,
well, that's the thing.
He hasn't qualified
you look
well
at Rahal.
here.
I look, Louis Foster. maybe Devlin DeFrancesco I'm putting on that list more than Louis Foster in terms of the oval experience that Foster has coming in. I mean, I know DeFrancesco has it too, but I don't know.
I guess I have to throw Graham on the list only because he has struggled, past results, right?
He's not made the race before in recent years. Look, this is what it's going to come down to. It's going to come down to whichever team shows up and doesn't show pace, or somebody that crashes early in the week and then is chasing it the rest. Because
we saw it with Marcus Ericsson last year.
Correct.
Barely made the field.
We've talked about it before. Is you don't have a lot of time before qualifying to really get things locked in, but you don't start until Tuesday. Friday is Fast Friday, so then you don't have the boost till Friday. And then weather, you could lose a day here or there. So if you get off the truck and you're slow Tuesday, and then let's say it rains Wednesday, and then you got to come back Thursday, or you wreck Tuesday, and you don't have a lot of time to zero in. So it's going to be based on these teams. And unfortunately, with the lack of testing time, I mean, do we really think that Rahal is going to all of a sudden find it and all of their drivers are going to qualify in the top 15? I don't think so.
No.
So without a lot of testing time overall, and you have the 2-day test and at IMS, who knows? It rains half of one day, you're down to 1.5 days, one day. You have a shunt, you're down to a half day. You don't know. But I think Prema's on that list because they're new. Rahal's on that list because they haven't shown pace in years, quite frankly, on IMS. And I think Coyne, particularly Jacob Abel, is on that list just because of inexperience.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are your favorites. I'm not saying anybody else could be on there, but the weather needs to cooperate during the week, and you just cannot have a shunt. Don't have a crash leading up, because you will be chasing it the rest of the week.
You working on your F1 by saying shunt?
Yes,
F1
my shunt. Yes,
is coming up this weekend in Australia.
Absolutely. So you just, especially one of those teams that's chasing it from the jump, that's already in that. Could they maybe not have a car make the race? I think that's what the thing is for them. I think if McLaughlin gets into the wall on Tuesday, you're not too worried. But
no,
if your Prema and one of your drivers gets into the wall on Wednesday morning, you lose the day, and then Thursday it rains, and then all of a sudden you're Fast Friday, and you haven't been on track since you crashed on Wednesday. We've seen that happen time and again. And you're chasing it all day Friday, and then the next time you're on track is Saturday morning for qualifying. So it is not a lot of time on track at Indianapolis. You and I have been vocal about saying just start on Monday. What is the big deal about not starting on Monday?
And it's not because of converting the track over from the GP. Like that and you take Sunday off because you don't get good crowds on Mother's Day anyway.
Right.
So yeah, I'm astounded that it seems like we're the only vocal people out there saying, why aren't you going Monday? It makes there are a lot of vocal people saying, why aren't you starting May 1st?
Well, let's be realistic here. But,
yeah.
You only have 3 days before Fast Friday, and that's if everything goes right, both with the weather and on track. It's not a lot of time.
I guess on the flip side, they at least do, the open test for 2 days. But we saw that last year, right? It got rain. Was it last year or 2 years ago? It got they had hardly any running because of rain and weather. So
yeah, it was last year was it Tuesday or Wednesday?
Yeah, one of the days was basically rained out.
If you lose an entire day, whether it's weather or wreck related or a problem with the car, it is brutal because there's not a lot of track time.
Especially with limited testing. I mean, we saw half the field take part in a test at Barber earlier this week, getting ready for that race, which is coming up in what? That's actually early May now, which is confusing. Right. Felix Rosenquist did have a crash, did walk away. It was part of a couple of drivers, him, DeFrancesco, and Louis Foster helping with the blue envelopes, which your Indy 500 tickets on the way. I got the email. They're on the way. So I'll probably get them, and of course I'll be out of town this weekend. So
so I can go to your mailbox and get them.
Yeah, well, I don't have a mailbox, so no, you cannot. Thankfully.
Do you have a P.O. box?
No, we just have a mail slot.
Oh, it's a slot.
Yeah.
Well, I'll use my key.
Yeah, because you have
a key. You know that? I have a key?
No, I did not. This is news to me.
Whoa. Well, in that case.
There is one person who has a key other than us, and it's because she lives down the street.
Yeah.
And it's a friend, just in case.
I'll work on that.
You don't live just down the street. So if you want to come and let the dog out and drive 35 minutes, please feel free.
Yeah, well, it's not too far from my work, so
that's true.
Sometimes I drive by, make sure you're behaving over there. So, but yeah, it's great coming back around. It's good to have Takuma Sato in. We will have bumping at 34. It would just feel better to have 35.
It sucked sending one driver home last year.
2, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
1,
and Nolan Siegel, I mean, he battled, but there was just no speed in that car.
No speed whatsoever in that car, and that's the thing. If you're chasing it during the week and you can't find it, and you're running out of time, and you lose some to the weather, or you have some problem under in the engine, something. That week really shrinks down to hours and eventually minutes to figure out what's going on. So we'll see, and you never know in Central Indiana in May what the hell the weather's going to be.
No doubt. Moving on to other bit of news that is maybe not that notable in terms of the news itself, but really what it could mean for the 2026 NTT IndyCar Series schedule. So Thermal officially announced, and it will take place.
Arlington.
Yeah. Wow. Thermal's coming up, but this is what it means for Thermal. But yes, Arlington officially announced, and it will be March 15th, 2026. Now, one could assume that St. Pete will be that first weekend in March in 2026. I think that's
correct.
Pretty safe.
2 weeks prior.
Yeah, so it would be March 1st.
March 1st, and then a week off, and then at Arlington.
Then we already know that Long Beach is usually the second or third weekend of April. It really just kind of depends on how things fall. So Easter next year is April 5th. So that means Long Beach will be April 12th.
So initially, our thought was, well, Thermal's gone. I guess there's still a spot for Thermal late March if you wanted to run it. For me, when you look at Thermal, and it'll be reinforced again next year.
Actually, I have to correct myself.
Okay.
So the IMSA schedule is announced. We know that Long Beach will be Sunday, April 19th.
Okay.
So that would mean the slot for Mexico or Mexico City would be
the week before Easter.
Before, right?
Well, week before Long Beach, or the week before Easter.
I mean, the original date for Mexico City, as Nathan Brown points out, April 12th. So,
okay,
Mexico City, April 12th. You go to Long Beach, April 19th.
You're down there already. That would work.
So, would you have Thermal March? Let's see where the date lies. It would be what, March 22nd or 29th?
Yeah,
I mean, you don't want to have a huge gap, right?
You don't want to have a huge gap, but I guess if you're adding both Arlington and Mexico City in, quite frankly, there's no room for Thermal. If Mexico City is not that time, of which it sounds like that's what they're zeroing in on, then I think maybe that's what you're looking at. I think if there's no Mexico City, Thermal's still on the schedule. If Mexico City is on the schedule, Thermal's off.
I mean, you hate having a gap where you're going a month, right? I mean, Arlington would be March 15th, and then Long Beach would be, Mexico City would be April 12th.
It's just...
But, I mean, that's asking a lot of your teams and crews in terms of the travel.
Yeah, deal with it.
Well, I'm talking like just the transporters.
Right.
Crisscrossing across the country.
True. But, it's a big event. And that's maybe my thing is with Thermal, is you and I were kind of going back and forth today via text, is let's be real about Thermal. It doesn't look good on television. It looks like what it is, a private course. And if IndyCar goal is put on events where there's a party atmosphere or a lot of people at events, and it looks really good on television, Thermal ain't it. Okay? Thermal is NOLA with people with money.
And backgrounds. And mountains in the back.
A nice backdrop, right? It's serving its purpose right now with an early season race to break up the gap. But long term, this is not going to be on the schedule.
Hear me out. What if it stays on the schedule, but goes back to the original format with some tweaks, obviously, of being more like a all-star race kind of challenge thing?
Why don't you just do that at the
beginning of the season?
Before the season starts.
Yeah.
It could be, and it could fit into what my idea was. You make it a super spring training week or weekend, whatever. You have multiple days of testing. You have a $1 billion challenge on Sunday.
Billion?
Yes, with a B, $1 billion. Really make it mean something. You have media days, or what they call content days,
yes,
quote unquote, because I don't know, because there's not a lot of media that cover IndyCar. Is that why they call it content days? You do
because it's
reveals.
Because digital. Like you're not getting newspaper writers and TV stations showing up. Besides local to Indianapolis,
you do livery reveals. How about a State of the Series speech that we used to get annually, right? That used to be in May. Maybe you do that at Thermal in February. Just make it a 3, 4, 5 day event, and that would be a perfect spot, I think, for spring training. And whether you want to have a race on Sunday for a butt ton of money prior to the season starts, I think that would be the best place for Thermal. I don't think Thermal plays well on television. It's going to look Mickey Mouse, regardless of what IndyCar does and Fox does. It's just going to look, quite frankly, pathetic because there's nobody there.
And you look at the schedule. I mean, look, by adding Arlington and potentially Mexico City, you're going to lose a race or two. I don't think they're going to go above 17 events. Now, I think it's a guarantee that Iowa goes down to one race, if it even remains.
Right.
And then I would say Thermal is also on the chopping block in terms of being a championship race.
Yes, Thermal is on the schedule out of necessity right now more than, hey, we want to be at Thermal long term. They don't really want to be at Thermal long term for a regular points race during the season.
Also, for Thermal itself, I mean, yeah, they got the initial boost, but it's one thing to go from a non-championship event to a points-paying championship event. You know, it costs back-to-back years. Like, yeah, you figured out some stuff from year one of holding a pseudo IndyCar event, but will the people in charge there deem it worthy to continue paying, a sanctioning fee to IndyCar as well?
And investing in the track. This is never going to be a track with grandstands all over the place and viewing mounds and all that stuff. This is not what the millionaires want at their playground. They want their place to be out of the way and secluded and private, and they just open it up for a weekend a year to have IndyCar there. That's it. I mean, this isn't all of a sudden, this isn't a track where you're going, okay, give it 5-6 years and it's going to look and feel much, much different. It's never going to happen at Thermal. So it's on, like I said, it's on the schedule because it has to be, because they have very, very few options early in the season for races. And that changes next year with the addition of Arlington and potentially Mexico City.
And don't forget, Thermal tickets, $475. That includes all 3 days for general admission and parking.
I mean, better than it was last year.
Yes, which was $2,000, and then they reduced the price. Kids over 6 and under 11 are only $240 and change. And then the VIP package is $1,769.50. You get a viewing area above South Pit Lane, tent coverage, full bar and snacks on deck, hosted food trucks, a lot more access, premium restrooms. What is premium? Yeah, does that mean you're getting like
actual plumbing
as opposed to a porta potty? You're getting like one of those portable restroom trailers,
a bidet option.
I doubt it.
Hey, who knows at Thermal? There's a lot of money floating around that place, but yeah, I honestly think this year will be the one and only regular season points race at Thermal.
I do too. And I think we lose one Iowa race at a minimum. I think we we obviously gain Arlington. I think we gain Mexico City, or potentially a different course. There's an interesting tidbit someone asked, and rightfully so, Marshall Pruitt in the Racer.com mailbag saying, Fundadora Park, which is in Monterey, Pato O'Ward's hometown, they also want racing to return. Is there a chance there could be a race there? Obviously, all the focus has been on Mexico City.
Especially with the popularity of NASCAR potentially going to Mexico City. Now, there was a story, I think, last week, maybe with all the happenings between the United States and Mexico in terms of tariffs and all that stuff. Could that put a wrench in a potential race for NASCAR in Mexico? Doesn't sound like it right now, but you never know where things could go. So who knows? Who knows with some of these governments? What's going on?
Yeah, and NASCAR officials and everyone basically said, yeah, this race is still happening. I would be shocked if it doesn't happen.
Likewise.
Very shocked. There's too much money at stake for NASCAR for them to not go, and I'm sure ticket sales have been brisk. I mean, let's be honest. NASCAR Xfinity Series ran there years ago, and ticket sales were good, if I recall correctly. And obviously there's NASCAR Mexico, which is a series, right?
Very much so.
The interest is there. I would be stunned if it doesn't happen.
And people are kind of, and I've said it too, NASCAR beat IndyCar to Mexico, but I don't think it's a worse thing if NASCAR goes there first and then IndyCar goes on the same track and you see the speed differences. I don't think that'd be the worst thing for IndyCar.
No.
I don't think, regardless of where IndyCar races in Mexico, they're going to have a problem selling tickets.
No, not with Pato O'Ward on board.
If
not at all.
It in his hometown, that'd be even better. But just go somewhere in Mexico and race a race. Race a race already in Mexico. Let's go.
That's right. Well, let's hope that gets announced soon, because, I mean, you got to close the deal here, and it has gone quiet. Now, I think we'll see a lot more stuff come out, I would assume, Long Beach time, in terms of
Long Beach
news around the Indy 500, potential schedule. Like, that just seems to be where the buildup for stuff happens. I doubt we'll get a lot out of thermal, but you never know.
No, I don't think so. I think you get into that April, May range, and that's when you really start hearing some fun stuff for the upcoming season.
All right. If you agree or disagree with us, we'd love for you to interact with us. You can always find us on social media. IndyCar Podcast is the handle on Instagram, on Twitter /X as well. On Facebook, just search for New Track Record. You can email us as well, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your questions, comments, or rants. Support us via Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. Thanks to Xavier and others for their support. And as always, download and listen for free on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, mailbag time. When we start things off, rate the race, because, well, we didn't get to it last week, as we explained. So you gave it, a 7?
I gave it a 7, which was higher than what you will give it and what our average was. I felt that, and it's probably just weighted because it was the return of IndyCar in the race. I take the broadcasting into account. I think Will Buxton was absolutely phenomenal. And while the strategy was kind of taken out of it with the first lap crash, I thought there was enough to keep us entertained in the field, despite a lack of passing, to keep me locked in. I think if here's my thing, and I grade on a curve because it was the beginning of the season. If you put a race like that in the middle of the season, let's say Mid-Ohio, I'm probably giving it a 5. But the fact that it was the start of the season, the excitement around Fox, I thought the pit lane reporters did a great job. Jamie Little was phenomenal. I wish he could do every IndyCar race this season. I give it a 7.
I gave it a 6.5. The Fox presentation was outstanding, as I explained last week. But ultimately, the racing on track, you got to find a way to change the rule with the alternate tires to green flag laps. I think that would improve
I wouldn't
the
even
alternate tire use. basically the way the alternate tires were at St. Pete, it was, why do we even have alternate tires?
Well, it was like we're going to make them
they're so bad.
bad, right? Or go off so much.
Yeah.
You couldn't even get one lap of green before they really fell off.
Mm-hmm.
We learned that in qualifying. So to me, I mean, this is the thing, is like, be careful what you wish for, because the drivers were like, well, we need more difference between blacks and alternates, and that's what they got. And it kind of hurt the show, to be honest. I think you should have to run a minimum, quite frankly, of 10 laps on alternates, because maybe you make it 10 overall laps or 5 green flag laps, something like that, because it's just too easy to start on alternates like it happened at St. Pete, crash, which more often than not happens at St. Pete, lap 1, and then you get off them. And it's just like one of those, how is this not common sense to change this rule? Like, why does it always have to become an issue before it's addressed? Like IndyCar, it's another example of IndyCar being reactive as opposed to proactive.
Oh, that's just America in general.
True, but you could look at this rule and say, well, and it's been like this for a while. Well, who's to say you can't just start on the alternate to get off them now and then race primaries the rest of the way? If the difference is going to be so much. Now, will the difference between blacks and alternates be as drastic at thermal? Who knows? But that rule, if they're going to be so much different and you only have to run 2 on the alternates, 2 laps, man, that makes things difficult to really improve the show.
Yes. The listeners gave it a 6.56, so very much in line.
Right on with you.
With what I had, and really close to what you had to say as well. So that was Rate the Race. We've covered that. Let's get to your comments. Sam and a bunch of numbers on Twitter. You don't need every number read off. Like,
I agree.
Get a better username.
I like the strategy.
Said, been waiting, in parentheses, I am patiently, to hear your reactions and to eat some crow on those TV numbers too. Well, yeah, you got it. We were thrilled. Way better than what we expected. A lot of people upset about our Dixon discussion from last week. 500 Indy 1911. So the amount of shade thrown on Dixon on this show is outlandish, and I will not stand for it. Bring me on the show. Look, I get people are upset, but and then going even further, look, the championships thing. I mean, a lot of people. And he goes on to say, I love the podcast, listen every week, but one host has claimed to an extent Dixon might be slipping or age is catching up to him. Same guy famously said something similar right before he won 3 of the last 4 races in 23. Not sure what Justin's issue is.
I don't have an issue with anybody. I'm just saying age equals decline.
Yes.
It's whatever.
Now, is Dixon still a top 5 driver? Yes.
Yes.
I don't think you've ever said anything other than that.
No, I've not.
But Palou is clearly far and away the best driver in the series.
I think maybe Dixon's still a top 3 driver in the series. But Alex Palou is the alpha.
Yes.
At Chip Ganassi Racing.
And to reiterate, that's the point we are trying to make.
And the stats back it up. Like,
yes.
All you have to say is he's won 3 of the last 4 championships, Alex Palou. Period. There's no comeback for that. 0. And it's okay. We're not saying, and I'm not saying, Scott Dixon isn't a generational driver. Not if you want to fight about the Mount Rushmore of IndyCar, then you can make a very good case for Scott Dixon. I'm also saying the fact that certain drivers, at least one, you cannot argue, has not surpassed Scott Dixon as the best in the series. Period. And that's Alex Palou.
Thankfully, 500 Indy 1911 said to give us a listen, saying it's a really good podcast. Justin is just wrong about Dixon.
Other than me, half of the host team is good.
I do my best. Other tweets. This from S2000_Moose. Glad IndyCar's ratings for St. Pete were up, but the real test will be Barber and Gateway. Barber overlaps F1 Miami, which had the largest U.S. audience of any F1 race in 2024, 3.1 million. Second test will be Gateway head-to-head with Canada, 1.8 million. Yikes.
Ooh, yeah, I mean...
You know what? There's no perfect schedule that avoids every NASCAR race, F1 race, every other sporting... Yeah. I mean, Thermal's head-to-head with the second round of the NCAA tournament. It is what it is. IndyCar's got to... Got to figure it out.
You got to weather the storms on the schedule that in which you have other things going on that are going to
and this is all
your eyeballs.
I mean, Gateway was standing, but most of this discussion is pre-Indy 500, which I think is key.
And I think two is one is to get eyeballs on your product. Two is to keep eyeballs on your product. So I think, getting the ratings that IndyCar so far has is going to put a greater onus on-track racing, of which St. Pete left a lot to be desired. We had I don't want to say a lot of races, but several races last year that were the same way. And this is the thing is it's one battle to get people to tune in. It's another battle to keep them tuned in. And whether it's the on-track racing, whether it's the presentation, whether it's the personalities, whatever, you got to hit home run after home run after home run to really keep those people engaged.
These comments from Jay Blasteri. Watched ARCA race in Phoenix at the time, obviously, last night. IndyCar on that track, no limits racing could be epic. And then also adds, just listen to the show while getting my Saturday workout in on the topic of a NASCAR IndyCar doubleheader for Fox. COTA could be the site for this. Great track, huge facility, could use more fans, and the speed difference between NASCAR and IndyCar would not be as noticeable. I would think it would be as noticeable, and I think they'd be on different layouts. I guess that's the challenge. Yeah. At a track like NASCAR wouldn't run the same layout.
I definitely wouldn't that's the front stretch going up the hill would be a noticeable difference in speed, just like if you had Formula One and IndyCar the same time. We've talked about it. We talked about it last week about if Fox was interested in a doubleheader. Feel like that's really the only way it would happen with a NASCAR, IndyCar, or IndyCar NASCAR doubleheader at a track.
Yeah, but an oval would be the option just because it's more centralized.
Oval early in the season would just be phenomenal. I don't care if IndyCars run at 10 o'clock at night on Friday night just to get it out the way for the NASCAR weekend. Just do it, right? And I think it's so valuable to have an oval before the 500. And I don't even care what oval it is. It doesn't have to be a super speedway. Just be on an oval somewhere.
That's fair. Sam says this, totally agree that as an event, St. Pete works as an opener and is well attended. But as far as the race, I agree. An oval would be a better show, an opener to show what IndyCar is. I agree, but the oval mindset in the heydays of kart, they were starting the season at Surfer's Paradise, which was a terrible TV time in the U.S.
Yeah.
Certainly not an oval, but a street circuit in Australia. So, yes, I agree. I would love for the season to start on an oval, but reality is I think they are in a good spot at St. Pete.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, though, that when you go with the slogan, the fastest racing on earth, and that's your promotions through the off season and getting people to tune in, and then you start the season at St. Pete, it's tough for newbies to watch that and say, how is this fast racing? That's my only thing.
Mm-hmm. Continuing on in the mailbag, a couple more things to get to. We talked about thermal and a few comments here. Lynn _ IndyCar said not necessarily in terms of thermal going away. New Texas race will replace one of the Iowa races. Thermal will stay on the schedule due to the need for an early race in warm weather, probably between Texas and Long Beach.
Which we've talked about.
Yeah.
The only way
and he has the date wrong because Long Beach is April 19th, I believe. But it really depends on Mexico City. I will be surprised if thermal is back as a full paying points event.
I don't think IndyCar or Fox want thermal to be a regular race on the schedule.
Probably not.
If it's only there out of necessity at this point.
Run _ Mark _ Run said, I was hoping for baseball season. Then again, the Bowling Hall of Fame is right down the street, so maybe it's still worth the trip. Yeah, going to a Rangers game, it's kind of a bummer that you can't add that into the weekend since it'll be right there. But I guess on the flip side, you're not competing with the Rangers. Obviously not the Cowboys either, so that's a positive.
Go see a Dallas Stars game.
There you go. Jeremy from HBG or Mavs. Well, no, you don't want to do that. There's no Luka, so never mind. Jeremy from HBG said, it served its purpose. You think they would have waited until after this year's race, but you know.
Well, it's not they're desperately trying to sell tickets to thermal.
No.
Not to the commoners, anyway.
No, definitely not. Again, we'll be surprised if it's a full points-paying event on the schedule. So that does it for the mailbag news and notes time. We start off with an interesting story that came down today as we record this on Thursday afternoon, March 13th here in the U.S., and it's that Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing has another reserve and development driver for, quote, select events in Toby Sowery, who competed in 3 IndyCar races last year with Dale Coyne Racing, but he is with the team. And of note, Yuri Vips still with the team in the same reserve driver role. So you have 2 reserve drivers, essentially, at Rahal. You have Romain Grosjean as a reserve driver at Prema, and that's it in terms of the paddock-wide. But interesting decision. Now, obviously, if there's an injury, you wonder who is the prime. Does Vips get the call up first? Like, how does that work? Or do they go outside the team?
Does it depend on the track?
All good questions.
Is Vips the road and street guy? Sowery the oval guy? I don't know. Do you think there's a point where we get to where some of these reserve drivers, because we're seeing more and more IndyCar have these reserve drivers, quote unquote, that they start getting practices like no, you see in Formula One?
I don't think so. They're not enough practice sessions. There's not enough practice time.
Well, I know there's not much practice time in Formula One either anymore.
Yeah, but F1 at least requires that reserve drivers.
What I'm wondering is,
get so much.
Do you ever see that happening in IndyCar?
No, I do not. Now, what I do see happening is what was happening in F1 for a long time is where quote-unquote reserve drivers come in and they'll pay the team a bunch of money to have the title of reserve driver.
Right. They don't do anything.
Now, I don't think that's happening in the case in IndyCar right now, to be clear, but maybe that becomes a thing down the road.
I just can't imagine the patience that Yuri Vips has. It's been years that this guy has been.
Yeah, now he's at least gotten a handful of races, but with charters, I don't see how he gets a race now unless there's an injury or something crazy happened and he has to fill in.
I don't understand what these reserve drivers are for.
Sim time, I guess.
I guess, but are they paying the teams? Are the teams paying them?
I would assume the teams are paying them. It's a role.
It's weird. I don't know. And it's not really we're doing this to prevent you from doing anything else because they're free to do anything else. It's just kind of, I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Just somebody explain to me what these reserve drivers do in IndyCar because they don't do anything in Formula One.
No, that is very true. Moving on in news and notes, and a tidbit from the Racer.com mailbag is that there may not be much savings in terms of weight with a new chassis.
Which is well, then what's the point?
Yes.
Right.
Well, why are we doing this? I mean, we need a new car, but if you're not going to find weight savings to make the cars faster, sleeker.
If it's going to look mostly the same and it's going to weigh about the same, then why the hell do we need a new car?
I mean, you need a new car regardless.
You do.
But if that's the end result, do better.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
It was kind of a throwaway line by Marshall Pruitt in the mailbag, and I kind of perked up going, well, hold on. I thought this thing was going to be lighter. And also kind of as we get deeper into the season, looking at the hybrid and saying, yeah, is this thing, if it keeps hybrid or if it keeps Honda in, it was worth it. But let's say Honda bails anyway. Nobody else comes in, and Ilmore is producing all the engines. It's why have the hybrid? It's an extra 50, 60 pounds of a car that's already overweight. The new car isn't going to be noticeably lighter from what it sounds like. So if it's not bringing in any added manufacturers and you actually lose one of them after bringing in hybridization, then what the hell's the point of hybridization?
Again, I agree.
Is kind of thing, because that's what we were told, right?
Yes.
Well, hybrid, IndyCar is very, very late at getting to the hybrid game. Cool, I understand. So now we have hybrid. This is what some of the OEMs meeting with IndyCar wanted to see. Now that IndyCar has it, is it going to entice anybody to join the series? And not only entice them to join the series, but if it doesn't entice a team to stay in the series, then just get rid of them. Get rid of them.
Elsewhere, interesting story from Marshall Pruitt of Racer.com talking about Fox's in-car graphic that covered up the aero screen. Interesting numbers in this. So First off, he says that according to IndyCar's research, the inner aeroscreen ring is more than twice as valued as the side pods in terms of generating screen time during broadcasts, which that's wild.
Right.
And then there's this. IndyCar charges its teams $350,000 per entry to have an in-car camera for the season. So to offset the cost, teams sell that space. Again, obviously the logos on the car elsewhere are largely the logos on the aeroscreen ring as well. So now, teams are upset that overlay, the graphic overlay, blocked the aeroscreen. But here's the thing. When they did do that during the race, as I said last week, they had the little window off to the lower right corner with the primary sponsor on the car. There was the sponsor of the in-car camera that was shown in a box, just like what NBC did in in-car shots. And this is something that IndyCar and Fox, they all have to figure out. But and Pruitt points this out. They had the logo bottom right-hand corner of the TV. So, I mean...
Well, the problem is you have teams with multiple sponsors on.
Yes. I mean, Meyer Shank in particular really goes all out with that space.
Yeah, I think McLaren maybe does too.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a surprise from what it sounds like to the teams, but maybe the impact was more than they thought it was going to be. At least the usage of the graphic was more.
And maybe when you use the graphic, also show it without the graphic for, I don't know, 5 seconds,
yeah,
10
maybe
seconds.
Like an intro, 5 seconds.
And then show it,
show
and
the
then
graphic, and
another
then take
5
the graphic
seconds
away for 5 seconds,
Yeah.
and then
before you cut away from that shot.
Yeah, I think it's. See, look, we just solved that problem. Let's call down to 16th and Georgetown and give them the idea and take credit. We just solved that.
If only it were that simple, right?
Well, it should be that simple.
Rob Buckner, who has led Chevrolet's IndyCar program since 2018, moving into a new role, he will oversee the majority of GM's race engine programs. So Andrew Shooter, who was number 2, will take over the primary IndyCar role. Also in news, you have interesting things in comments regarding Joseph Newgarden. So first off, we'll get to the event. So Newgarden, who is at South by Southwest, I think today, but the IMS Museum announced an evening with Joseph Newgarden April 22nd at the museum. He will join Doug Bowles. Bowles will host in-depth discussion, a Q&A autograph session for guests. You can purchase tickets on their website, imsmuseum.org/tickets. But then he had some interesting comments. So first off, he said this: I want to see IndyCar be brought back to the forefront of motorsport. I believe in it. It's not a dream or wish. It was a reality 30 years ago, and I think it deserves its place back at the front of the pack. Now, is that possible to be back in terms of in the U.S.? Now, not globally, and I think he's meaning in the U.S.
No, I think it's possible. I think...
Say the Fox TV deal stays as it is with all the races on network plus Indy 500 qualifying on network, and that continues, say, for 5 years. Is it possible by then? I think you've closed the gap considerably by then, because you look at NASCAR, and they have, 4 races on Big Fox and the rest on FS.
5 of 13, I think.
Yeah.
5 of 11, something like that.
And then at NBC, it's kind of the same thing, where a lot of them are going on USA. And then you have Prime thrown in now. You have TNT, which is cable.
Right.
So, I mean, NASCAR is selling out to the highest bidder for their TV deal, and they're continuing to make more money.
Right.
But the ratings are stable, but you're obviously not maximizing what you can do compared to network. So, say in 2030... if IndyCar keeps progressing and the TV deal is still with Fox and it's the same as it is now, have you made significant inroads? And I say yes. I think you have.
I think you made significant inroads. I think in order for IndyCar to surpass NASCAR again in this country, NASCAR has to shoot itself in the foot.
Yes.
As well. They can't just be Indy's car's growth. NASCAR has to take a decline, whether it's competition-based, whether it's behind the scenes legally, as we're seeing with the charters.
And if is that the route that it goes?
They have to, similar to the split, not saying they split into 2 stock car series, but there has to be a catalyst within NASCAR that absolutely fractures the fan base.
Just like within IndyCar with CART and IRL split.
Correct.
I mean, to be fair, NASCAR was closing the gap, and NASCAR popularity in reality peaked really between 1998 and 2003 or 4 in this
early
country.
2000, all the pop-up tracks.
And really fell off after 2008 because of the recession really impacted racetracks and fans and buying tickets and all of that, along with, the tire disaster, the Brickyard 400 that year. So
that said, it gets 5 times the ratings.
Yes.
And about 50 times the income from TV money and streaming money now that IndyCar gets. So the numbers don't add up in that respect for sure. But I think even if IndyCar does everything it needs to do to grow its base over the next 5 or 6 years, it then needs help from NASCAR. Something needs to happen, some sort of cheating scandal or, fixing races, or I don't know. There has to be something that drives people away from Cup in droves to allow IndyCar to surpass NASCAR again. I don't think it can be completely one-sided in terms of gains made by IndyCar. Now,
this other comment, this was to AL.com, which is the Alabama, the Birmingham newspaper. What's the name of that paper? I'm not sure.
The Birmingham, I don't know, Sentinel, Daily Sentinel.
I don't know. But Newgarden had this to say, you're not going to find a series that has better parity at this high of a level. That is not the case in Formula One. It's more of a manufacturer's championship. And certainly in NASCAR, I think you're a little more top-heavy. Irony? I mean, you drive for Penske.
Right?
IndyCar is top-heavy with Penske and Ganassi.
Here's my problem, though. And F1 hasn't even started yet. It will start this week in Australia. There are 4 teams and 8 drivers that can consistently win races. And who knows what the championship looks like?
Do we think Kimi Antonelli can realistically win a race?
I don't know. Probably not.
But yes, between Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, yes.
There's
they're all
4
capable.
teams. Can any of those 4 teams win the championship? Probably not. It's probably McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull. I'm not putting Mercedes up there to win a championship. I'm just saying the gap is closing between this whole parity thing between IndyCar and Formula One. Now, granted, this season will say a lot, but next year when the new engine regs and everything come in for Formula One, it could really throw things for a loop. So we saw in the second half of the year, last year in Formula One, where it wasn't Red Bull supremacy anymore. And McLaren ended up winning the Constructors' Championship. So this simple, hey, we're much more competitive than Formula One, that IndyCar's been able to say for a long time, that era is coming to an end, in my opinion, especially when you look at the fact that only 2 teams can win a championship in this series in IndyCar, right? And
yes,
80% of the races every year are won by 2 teams. So be careful what you say, because Formula One is coming back to, it's not just Mercedes dominated and then it was handed off to Red Bull dominated. I think you're coming back to multiple teams that can win races anytime, anywhere, as we saw second half of last season in Formula One. I appreciate, Joseph Newgarden's not necessarily wrong, but the gap is closing.
Yeah, I just think until IndyCar is not just Penske and Ganassi winning every championship for over the past dozen plus years, and the Indy 500 outside of this decade, at least outside of Takuma Sato in Elio in 20 and 21. Now 20 was first year with the aero screen, a lot of other stuff going on. Then Elio in 21, everything just perfectly came together. But since we've had Ganassi, Penske. So
yeah, I mean, I've said it for a while, and you've said it as well. Like, I just don't think this series is as competitive as people like to claim it is.
Now, can a lot of people win races? Yes.
Does certain things need to happen at races for a team to win? Yes. I mean, and that's the thing. Like, if you have a regular race with nothing thrown in, no wrenches, no weather, no nothing, there's limited teams that can win a race in IndyCar. But you throw weather into it, strategy, all that, yeah, anybody can win a race. But you could say that in any racing series.
Elsewhere, the Cadillac F1 entry officially approved by the FIA. So Cadillac F1 will join. A lot of talk about Herta and the seat. Essentially, is it held for him? Well, he's obviously got to get the super license points. And he's said, well, if I leave the situation I'm in now, it's not like I can just come back in a couple years and it be the same thing. Like, it's never going to be the same, which is a fair point. Obviously, I think if he gets the F1 opportunity, I still think he takes it.
Yeah.
But one positive is the goal was for the cars to be made in Indiana, and that still seems to be the case in the Andretti Global Fishers HQ.
I think it's going to be like the off-season base for them. I think during the season, Formula One season.
Yeah, they'll be based in the UK,
England,
like everyone else. But yes,
but I think
still HQ, which I think is exciting.
It's pretty cool. I think, yes, to think that they're going to run operations out of there the entire season is not accurate, but I think that's their home base, that's their HQ, that's where they'll be to work on next year's cars and all that stuff. So I think it's pretty cool. I hope to see a greater impact around the state with Formula One, with Cadillac F1 being in Indianapolis.
And this is cool. So the Purdue Grand Prix track, which is like a go-kart race, is that right?
Okay.
They now have an IMS brick as well. So they're one of two
in
tracks.
the track, right?
Yes.
In the track.
With
one of two. Used to be Ontario. The mystery of those bricks.
Yeah, that's true.
We've brought up before.
So I think that's pretty cool. And then this was a fascinating nugget that Adam Stern found from the Newton Daily News, Newton, Iowa, which is where the Iowa Speedway is. 2 sports tourism grants were awarded to Newton in late February by the Iowa Economic Development Authority in order to boost upcoming races at the Iowa Speedway. NCE received $437,500 for the IndyCar race weekend and $50,000 for the NASCAR Cup weekend. So that tells me that that's to help for the loss of Hy-Vee being the primary sponsor and everything going on with that event.
Every little bit helps. That is a race outside of thermal that I look at as potentially in danger going forward with Hy-Vee's exit. So any amount of financial assistance that weekend can get would be very good.
Okay, let's rifle through tweets of the week.
Yes, sir.
We'll go back and include what we missed from before. And the first one was Joseph Newgarden said, I bet you want to know what was written on these helmet visors. We have many more battles to go. And it's him with Pato Award. And Pato said, hey, bro, thanks for the free points. You can make that out on there. Hickey93 in response to that Rogue Aero Screen Fox graphic.
Yeah, the number.
We didn't know what the number meant. We thought it was an error. And he said that's the 1 to 10 scale of how much Mark Miles likes this person.
Which was an amazing response.
Scott McLaughlin said, IndyCar on Fox did me dirty, talking about his cartoon graphic. And then you have this Gary Anderson guy who's writes with Formula 4 Success, and I guess he's formerly involved in F1. And he said about Colton Herta, he makes too many mistakes. He's definitely got speed in IndyCar. I don't know that he's got speed and the mental capacity to pick up Formula One. And so a lot of people, Alexander Rossi, So Alexander Rossi said, who's Gary Anderson? And then Jenna Fryer said, he converted
kick in the NFL.
Yes. He converted 122 straight kicks while helping the Vikings to a 15-1 1998 season record. In the 1999 NFC title game, then his 39-yard attempt was wide left. The Vikings lost and didn't go to the Super Bowl. Thought that was great as well.
Yes.
Nolan Siegel posted, St. Pete highlights just dropped, and it's just the nose cone of him getting dumped.
It was like 9 seconds long, and then it was like, what? Thank you for watching, or...
Yeah, it's a 9-second clip. You get to the end, and it says, thanks for watching. So that was outstanding. And then Scott McLaughlin, we didn't even get into Bob Tasca of the NHRA and him being upset about the fastest racing on Earth with IndyCar.
Right. Now, we ruffled some feathers on, I did. I'll take full responsibility. But we were in agreement.
Yes.
NHRA. Is it racing?
I mean, it's drag racing.
It's drag racing, but the skill involved. Now, I've never drag raced. I'm not saying
it's reaction time.
It's reaction. You
can control
in a straight line. Okay, there's no fuel mileage. There's no tire changes. There's
Pit
no
stops.
turns. It's just in how we think about racing in 2025. It's not racing.
Yes, it is.
That's our opinion.
Yeah,
but that's just how we feel now. We had plenty.
It is a time trial series.
Yeah, it's just how fast can you react to green and get to the other end of a stretch of road that's in a straight line.
Yeah. So Scott McLaughlin had this to say. Well, at least the commercials are reaching far and wide. Hope you tune in, Bob, on March 23rd at 3 p.m. on Fox. I thought that was great.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Anything that we missed?
No, I was going to bring up that NHRA thing, but you touched on it, and that's it. So hopefully all of this saves. So we can go
no joke. All right, let's get to our random split error driver of the week, and it's a redo of last week.
It is, and for the second time, we're going to talk about the racing dentist, Dr. Jack Miller. And we've brought him up several times over the course of the podcast, but I don't think we've ever had him as our random split error driver of the week. Of course, Dr. Jack Miller, who is a practicing dentist in the Indianapolis area, and as I mentioned last week, so he races on Sunday and then he sees patients on Monday. You could watch him race on Sunday, and then as he's filling in a cavity, you could talk to him about how the race went the day before. But overall, in his racing, he did 22 races over the course of 5 years with 3 different teams. Started in 96, 97 with Arizona Motorsports. Then in 1998, Sinden Racing Services. And then 1999 and 2000, TriStar Motorsports, concluded in 2001 with Cahill Racing. Overall, attempted 4 times to make the Indianapolis 500. Qualified 3 times. A best start of 1998 of 15th. And then finished 20th, which was his best finish in his rookie season, 1997. Failed to qualify in 2000, withdrew due to injury in 2001 after a crash at Atlanta, the race before the Indianapolis 500. I thought the most interesting part of Dr. Jack Miller's racing career, outside of, being a dentist, was the fact that he won Indy Lights in 1993, but it was the B Series championship. Now, this class of racing was only won in 1993 and consisted of drivers using the previous March chassis, as the rest of the series introduced new Lola chassis. Before you get excited about Dr. Jack Miller and how he dominated the B Series, this note, he won the championship by virtue of being the only driver to compete in every race in a B Series car.
Now, he was competing against the Lolas, though, right?
No, they had their own racing series, I think. Yes, it was only run in 93 and consisted of drivers using the previous March chassis, as the rest of the series introduced new. So, no, I don't know. Did they race concurrent?
I would assume that he was racing completely different.
Lolas. So it was like trying to figure out a IMSA race with all the different classes.
Yeah.
Okay, but you only had 2 classes as opposed to, I don't know, what do they have, 5? Something like that. So basically, he won the championship because he was the only one who started every race in a B Series car. So did win Indy Lights, the B Series championship in 1993. His final race on track was that 2001 race at Atlanta where he was injured, withdrew from the 2001 Indianapolis 500, and that was it. And of course, he is a co-owner of the Miller Vinatieri team since 2018 with his son, Jack William Miller, drives in Indy Lights.
And they're affiliated with HMD now as well.
Ah, very nice. So, of course, he's the team was co-founded with former Indianapolis Colts kicker Adam Vinatieri. So started in Formula 4, moved into USF 2000, Indy Pro 2000, now in Indy Lights. So the racing dentist, Dr. Jack Miller, this week's random split era driver of the week.
And he came to my elementary school when I was in 4th grade. This would have been 1999, I believe.
So he wasn't,
and I have his autographed hero card somewhere. I'm sure. I don't know where, but I think I do have it somewhere.
Is it on a tube of Crest?
No, but it was the Crest card that came to my school, and that is on the autographed hero card.
He was sponsored by Crest and Waterpik over the course of his career.
Which I don't know Waterpik went back that far. I mean, I know it now, but I didn't know it as a brand until, 5 years ago. Right.
He had the support of dental product companies in addition to racing, and now starting his own team. And Jack William Miller, doing his best to try to make an impression and make it up to the big show, was lined up for, I think, a top 5, top 6 finish at St. Pete and wrecked on one of the final laps. So not a good start for him in Indy Lights this season. But we'll see what the rest of the season entails with Dr. Jack Miller co-sponsoring his son's team.
All right. For Justin Kinney, I am Caleb Hatch. F1 starts this weekend, 12 hours of Sebring. Where's NASCAR at this week?
I have no idea.
I don't know either.
Let's look.
But so plenty of racing action before IndyCar returns next weekend at Thermal. We'll preview Thermal and any IndyCar news that drops in the week ahead coming up next week.
They are at Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. There you go.
And
so plenty of racing action on the docket. But that does it for us. We'll be back next week on New Track Record Podcast.